Hey friends, I'm Jaxon, and this is Animal Encounters. Today, I'm going over some terrifying final footage captured just right before the deadliest animal attacks ever. From a photographer who broke distance rules in Alaska to a dive videographer's deadly meeting with a bull shark in murky waters. It was October 9th, 2014. And the afternoon light cast long shadows across the Fred Meyer parking lot in Anchorage, Alaska. A crowd was forming near the cart return area, witnessing the animal that locals knew to fear during rutting season. Helga Soren, 52, had lived in Anchorage for 23 years, having moved from Minnesota shortly after her divorce. She had 2 adult daughters living in Seattle and a small circle of friends from her church group. Her Facebook account showed frequent posts about Alaskan wildlife, mostly photographs taken from safe distances or through car windows. Her supervisor later told investigators that Helga had requested to leave work an hour early that day to run errands before an evening church meeting. Her routine typically included grocery shopping on Thursdays, a pattern she had maintained for years. Alaskan moose are the largest members of the deer family in North America, with adult bulls standing over 6 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing between 1,200 and 1,600 pounds. Their front legs, equipped with incredibly powerful muscles, can deliver enormous blunt force, enough to cause catastrophic internal injuries. During fall rutting season, bulls experience dramatic hormonal changes that increase aggression levels significantly, making them particularly dangerous to humans. By the time Helga arrived, about 15 people were scattered around the parking lot, mostly near vehicles or the store entrance. The bull moose stood between a white pickup and a silver sedan, lowering its head to sniff the pavement. Although guidelines recommend staying at least 50 feet away, Helga positioned herself about 20 feet off, phone raised to chest height, recording. A man loading lumber gestured for her to move back. She glanced briefly but continued forward. The moose, already showing clear agitation, flattened its ears against its skull. Helga adjusted her position again, moving slightly to her right. The bull's head remained low, his eyes fixed on her as she moved. Then, with no additional warning, the moose lunged forward and launched a devastating front leg kick, his right hoof driving forward like a battering ram. The kick struck Helga in the left side of her torso, just below her rib cage, and continued through to her left hip. The force violently knocked her backward, partially lifting her off balance, sending her crashing down onto the pavement a short distance away. A dashcam in a vehicle parked 3 spaces away captured the strike from a side angle, corroborating witness reports and showing her body crumpling against the pavement. As she lay on the ground, the moose stepped forward and delivered a couple of downward stomps with its front hooves to her torso and lower body before stepping back. She remained motionless. The moose stepped backward but did not leave the immediate area, instead moving laterally between parked cars while continuing to display agitation. Several bystanders moved toward Helga but stopped when the moose turned in their direction, his proximity making any rescue attempt immediately dangerous. Witnesses later described seeing her left leg move slightly and hearing labored breathing sounds, but her eyes remained closed, and she made no attempt to stand or call for help. When the moose finally wandered toward the far end of the parking lot, 2 men approached Helga, one of them a physician's assistant who happened to be shopping. He immediately noted her deteriorated condition. He instructed bystanders not to move her and to keep watch for the moose's return. Multiple witnesses called 911 within seconds of the initial strike. Fire department paramedics arrived 7 minutes later, finding Helga unconscious but still breathing. They immobilized her spine before transport and departed for the hospital. The moose had by then moved into the wooded area behind the shopping center and was no longer visible. Helga died in the emergency department at 4:31 p.m., 44 minutes after the attack. Emergency clinicians performed rapid imaging and initiated emergency interventions, but the internal damage and catastrophic blood loss were not survivable. The attending physician documented that her internal bleeding resulted from multiple high-force impacts, including the initial kick, ground impact, and subsequent stomping. Officials investigated the incident, monitored the moose, issued public safety guidance, and seized existing footage of the incident. Helga's daughters released a brief statement through the hospital requesting privacy. It was September 2nd, 2016, when a wildlife park in Limpopo Province, South Africa, became the scene of a fatal encounter. The private facility housed several species of African predators in large enclosures connected by service corridors used for maintenance and feeding operations. The early morning air was crisp, and the animals were displaying heightened activity levels as feeding time approached. The park's layout included multiple security gates and barriers designed to separate staff from the dangerous animals during routine operations. However, recent equipment malfunctions combined with manual overrides had created dangerous safety vulnerabilities that required immediate attention before public hours began. The facility had experienced several minor incidents in recent months, raising concerns about aging infrastructure and failing alarm systems. Mindy Gantz, a 34-year-old wildlife park maintenance supervisor, had worked at the facility for over 6 years. Known among her colleagues for taking procedural shortcuts to save time, Gantz was experienced in handling the complex gate systems and security protocols. She had been called in early that morning to inspect a faulty service gate that provided access to one of the lion holding areas. Her reputation for efficiency often came at the cost of following complete safety procedures, a habit that had been noted in previous performance reviews but never formally addressed. Gantz had successfully completed hundreds of similar maintenance tasks without incident, creating a false sense of security about the risks involved. The lions had experienced delayed feeding the previous day, lowering their tolerance to intrusion and increasing food-driven responsiveness. Gantz was aware of the feeding schedule disruption, but felt confident in her ability to quickly assess and repair the malfunctioning gate mechanism. The animals had been pacing restlessly throughout the night, displaying clear signs of hunger-driven aggression. The service corridor she entered was equipped with fixed security cameras that recorded all maintenance activities. The area was designed with multiple fail-safe systems, including primary and secondary gates, that were supposed to ensure complete separation between staff and animals during inspections. Lions are apex predators perfectly evolved for cooperative hunting and overwhelming prey through coordinated attacks. Adult lions possess incredible strength, with males weighing up to 420 pounds and capable of generating bite forces estimated between 600 and 650 pounds per square inch. Their powerful limbs can deliver devastating blows, while their retractable claws can inflict deep lacerations. When hunting as a group, lions employ sophisticated tactics, where one animal typically secures the prey while others assist in the kill. Their natural instinct is to target the neck and throat area, using their powerful jaws to clamp down on vital structures and induce asphyxiation. The sustained pressure from a throat bite restricts airflow and blood circulation to the brain, leading to rapid unconsciousness and death. Gantz made a critical error by entering the restricted corridor alone without following proper verification procedures. She failed to ensure that the secondary gate was fully engaged and locked, assuming the malfunctioning primary gate would provide adequate protection. Investigators later determined that disabled warning indicators and a compromised alarm system had created a cascading failure in the safety protocols. As she examined the gate mechanism, 2 adult lions managed to enter the service corridor through the compromised secondary barrier. The animals advanced through the corridor while constant machinery noise likely masked the sound of their approach. Their hunger-driven state made them more opportunistic and aggressive than usual. The first lion struck without warning, using its massive paw to knock Gantz to the concrete floor. The impact was devastating, sending her sprawling and immediately compromising her ability to escape. Before she could recover, the second lion moved in to secure her upper body. According to the incident report based on security footage analysis, the combined weight of both animals overwhelmed any possibility of resistance. The lions positioned themselves to prevent escape, with one animal delivering what appeared to be a sustained bite to the neck area. The typical killing method employed by lions to induce asphyxiation through jaw pressure on the throat and windpipe. The attack continued as the lions maintained their hold. While the animal's claws inflicted multiple wounds, the fatal mechanism was consistent with asphyxiation, resulting from the sustained bite pressure to the neck region. Movement ceased within minutes as respiratory failure proved fatal. The lions remained with the body until park staff discovered the scene during routine morning checks. The incident triggered an immediate investigation by wildlife authorities, resulting in enhanced safety protocols and mandatory buddy system requirements for all maintenance operations. The park faced significant legal challenges and was temporarily closed pending safety improvements. Gance's family filed wrongful death lawsuits citing inadequate safety measures and poor equipment maintenance. The case highlighted the ongoing risks faced by wildlife facility workers and led to industry-wide safety reforms. It was March 7th, 2016, and the dry season sun had already pushed temperatures past 80 degrees across the open grasslands of a private wildlife conservancy in southern Kenya. Morning game drive safaris had departed before dawn, open-top Land Cruisers carrying small groups along rutted tracks that wound through golden savanna dotted with scattered acacia. Laurens Dickhorn, a 44-year-old pharmaceutical logistics director from the Netherlands, had arrived at the conservancy 2 days earlier. The safari was his first, a milestone trip planned around his passion for wildlife, photography. He had invested heavily in professional-grade equipment and spent the previous mornings photographing plains game with visible intensity, often standing in his seat to gain elevation. The morning game drive safari carried Dickhorn and 3 other guests under the guidance of Otieno Kiplagat, a 38-year-old Kenyan guide with over 12 years of conservancy experience. An armed ranger escort accompanied the vehicle, as is standard in some private conservancies. Kiplagat instructed all guests to remain seated inside the vehicle at all times. Kiplagat located a pride of 7 lions resting in tall grass within 20 to 30 yards of the track. The grass obscured the animals from certain angles. Dickhorn attempted several photographs, but grew visibly frustrated with the obstructed sight lines. "I keep thinking about how that frustration can override every warning you've been given. You travel thousands of miles for a single photograph, and in that moment, the rules start, feeling like obstacles instead of protection." He climbed down from the Land Cruiser on the far side, briefly out of Kiplagat's immediate line of attention, and moved several yards into the open grass with his camera raised toward the pride. Kiplagat noticed immediately and ordered him back. Tourists in a trailing safari vehicle approximately 40 yards behind had been recording the pride. Their camera captured portions of the incident, though the footage was later submitted to authorities and has never been publicly released. African lions are among the continent's most formidable predators, with adult females weighing up to 280 pounds and capable of reaching speeds approaching 35 miles per hour in short bursts. Lionesses are the primary hunters within a pride, relying on coordinated ambush tactics that exploit tall grass to close distance before prey can react. A lion's killing method relies on a suffocating clamp over the nose and mouth or compression of the major blood vessels in the neck, which can render prey unconscious within minutes. The lioness had been concealed in the grass less than 15 yards from where Dickhorn stood. The charge erupted without warning, covering the distance in barely 2 seconds. The impact struck him from the side and drove him to the ground. His camera tumbled through the grass. A brief struggle followed as the lioness repositioned, attempting to secure a killing hold. The ranger fired, but the attack had already reached a critical stage. 2 seconds. That's the window between standing upright with a camera and being on the ground with no way out. That number is the one that stays with me. Dickhorn was unresponsive at the scene, and later confirmed dead by responding medical personnel. The investigation determined he had exited the vehicle in direct violation of conservancy rules. Kiplagat and the conservancy were cleared of liability. This story isn't really about a lion attack. It's about what happens when confidence replaces caution in a place where the margin for error is measured in heartbeats. It was September 12th, 2015, and early autumn had turned a remote national park in southern Alaska into a feeding frenzy as thousands of sockeye salmon crowded the shallows of a nearby river, and brown bears converged from across the region to gorge before winter set in. For Melina Corshaw, a 29-year-old freelance nature photographer from Portland, this was the trip that was supposed to change everything. She had spent 2 years building a portfolio focused on North American megafauna and hoped footage from the area, one of the most famous bear viewing locations in the world, would help her secure representation with a stock photography agency. The trip had cost nearly $4,000 in permits, float plane charters, and lodging, money she couldn't afford to spend on images that looked like everyone else's. Melina arrived at the park's base camp via float plane that morning, stepping onto the gravel beach with 2 camera bags and a tripod case. Weather conditions were clear with temperatures near 52 degrees. The river was crowded with bears fishing at the falls, where salmon gathered in high concentrations while attempting to leap upstream. From the elevated viewing platforms, she could count more than a dozen bears working the water at once, an extraordinary concentration of predators in a space smaller than a football field. Park regulations required visitors to maintain a minimum distance of 50 yards from bears, and rangers stationed at the platforms actively enforced these rules. The platforms were packed with photographers shoulder to shoulder, many using telephoto lenses that produced nearly identical compositions. By early afternoon, Melina had captured several hours of footage from the designated platforms. According to other visitors interviewed later, she expressed frustration that the distance restrictions prevented her from getting shots that would stand out in an oversaturated market. She left the main viewing area and walked downstream along the river's edge, where the terrain became less managed and visibility more obstructed by vegetation. The sound of the falls faded behind her as she moved further from the platforms and the rangers who monitored them. A ranger would later report seeing Melina roughly 80 yards from the platform, filming with a handheld camera while slowly moving closer to a female bear and 2 cubs fishing near the far bank. The sow was a large adult, her coat dark and slicked from the river. The 2 cubs, likely born that spring, stayed close to her flanks as she waded through shallow water. The ranger began walking toward Melina to issue a warning. Before he closed half the distance, the situation changed rapidly. Brown bears, also called grizzlies, are among North America's largest land predators, with adult females weighing between 300 and 500 pounds. Females with cubs are extremely protective and perceive threats within a much larger radius than solitary bears. They can accelerate from a standstill to 35 miles per hour in seconds. Their claws, measuring up to 4 inches long, are adapted for digging, but function effectively as weapons during defensive attacks. The sow noticed Melina when the distance between them had closed to roughly 35 yards. The bear's head snapped up from the water, locking onto the figure on the bank. For a fraction of a second, everything was still. Then the bear charged across the river, water spraying from her legs as she closed the gap. Melina dropped the camera and ran toward the tree line. The bear covered the distance in seconds. The camera captured the bear striking Melina from behind with enough force to throw her forward onto the rocky ground. The bear bit her shoulder and shook violently, then released and struck her with both front paws. Melina attempted to curl into a fetal position. The bear continued the attack, focusing on her head and upper back, for roughly 45 seconds. The ranger, still some 60 yards away, radioed for assistance and began moving toward the scene, deploying his air horn as he closed the distance. He was far beyond pepper spray range. The bear stopped attacking when Melina ceased moving. It stood over her body briefly before returning to the river where its cubs had remained. The ranger reached Melina within minutes and immediately radioed for emergency medical evacuation. A helicopter arrived from a nearby airfield roughly half an hour later, but paramedics determined she had died before arrival. The autopsy identified catastrophic injuries to the skull and cervical spine as the cause of death. Investigators recovered Melina's camera a short distance from her body. Park officials used the footage during their review and determined that Melina had violated distance regulations and approached a sow with cubs, the highest risk scenario for bear attacks in the region. It was March 14th, 2013, and the land cruiser lurched through the shallow crossing of the Okavango Delta's Tamalakayan River. Elena Ruiz Calderon leaned halfway out the rear passenger window. Her camera trained on the riverbank where 3 massive crocodiles basked in the midday heat. Elena was a 29-year-old Spanish-language teacher from Spain who had saved for 2 years to afford this safari. Her colleagues described her as enthusiastic to the point of recklessness, the type who would climb fences at the zoo for better photographs. She had arrived in Botswana 5 days earlier, her first time in Africa, with 3 memory cards and a waterproof camera rated for extreme conditions. She had specifically requested a safari that included river crossings, fascinated by the idea of driving through crocodile habitat. Elena's guide, a Botswanan man named Thabo Modis, had been leading safaris for 11 years without incident. He had explained during the morning briefing that all windows must remain closed during water crossings, a rule that existed for precisely the scenario about to unfold. Adult Nile crocodiles commonly reach double-digit lengths and can be massive. Exceptionally large males may exceed 13 to 16 feet and can weigh well over 1,000 pounds. Their hunting strategy relies on explosive ambush attacks from below or beside the water's surface, often targeting prey at the waterline. As the land cruiser entered the crossing, Thabo noticed Elena opening her window. He told her twice to close it immediately. She waved him off without looking away from her viewfinder, calling back that she was fine and knew what she was doing. 2 other tourists in the vehicle, a Dutch couple named Frans and Margot de Vries, later reported feeling uneasy about Elena's behavior, but said nothing. The crocodiles on the bank appeared motionless, their eyes tracking the vehicle's progress through the water. Elena extended her upper body further out the window, camera clutched in both hands, as she filmed the reptiles just a few feet away. Thabo judged that stopping mid-channel risked bogging the vehicle, so he urged her again while keeping the land cruiser moving toward the far bank. The recovered footage shows clear footage of the basking crocodiles, then pans across the water's surface. Elena's breathing is audible on the recording, excited and rapid. Thabo's voice can be heard again, more urgent now, telling her to get inside. The vehicle was approximately 3/4 of the way across when the water beside the rear passenger door suddenly churned. The attack came from a direction Elena wasn't filming. A crocodile, submerged and invisible in the murky water, had detected the vibrations of the vehicle and the splashing near the open window. Witnesses saw the moment Elena jerks downward as something yanks her arm. She screams as she tries to pull back. The crocodile had latched onto her right forearm just below the elbow, its serrated teeth penetrating through skin, muscle, and tendons. Eyewitness accounts from people in the vehicle describe seeing Elena's body pulled violently against the window frame, her left hand grasping desperately at the door. The crocodile, estimated at 14 feet long, based on later examination of the footage, used its body weight and the mechanical advantage of the water to drag her downward and outward. Elena's entire upper body was wrenched through the window opening. Leaning well out of the window with her torso angled toward the bank made it possible for the croc to wrench her upper body through the opening. One of the passengers grabbed at Elena's legs, but the crocodile's grip was absolute. The crushing pressure of its jaws had already fractured both bones in Elena's forearm. She managed one more scream before her head disappeared below the water's surface. Elena's struggle became visible through the car window as she plunged beneath the murky water, dark swirls and froth marking each violent thrash. The crocodile's pale underbelly surfaced briefly as it executed a death roll, spinning her in the current with bone-crushing force. For a fleeting moment, Elena broke the surface again before the predator dragged her under, deeper this time, leaving only the rippling water behind. Thabo accelerated hard, the land cruiser surging up the far bank within seconds of the attack. Tourists were screaming incoherently, while someone shouted that they needed to go back. Thabo radioed for emergency assistance. The nearest ranger station was 18 miles away on rough roads. A response team arrived 31 minutes after the attack. Search efforts began immediately, but were hampered by poor visibility. and the presence of multiple large crocodiles. Elena's camera was recovered 200 yards downstream the following morning, snagged on submerged vegetation. Investigators imaged the memory card and preserved the original files and timestamps as part of the chain of custody. The memory card remained functional, providing the only detailed record of the attack. No human remains were found during the 2-day search. The coroner's report, filed without a body, listed probable cause as drowning with massive traumatic injuries and estimated that survival after submersion was likely brief. The Safari Lodge implemented mandatory window locks on all vehicles and revised its liability waivers to include specific language about crocodile encounters. The footage was shared with the family, and public release was withheld. It was October 22, 2014, and a cold rain had been falling over a regional city in the Republic of Georgia since before dawn. A small zoological facility on the city's northern edge opened for another sparsely attended weekday. Puddles had formed along the cracked pathways between enclosures, and the grounds were empty of visitors. The facility housed several Caucasian brown bears in adjoining enclosures. The zoo had been built during the Soviet era and received minimal upgrades since its service corridors narrow and poorly lit. The bears were shifted between outdoor areas and indoor holding pens through manual gates operated from the service corridor. Communication between keepers relied entirely on verbal confirmation. There was no lockout board, no written shift log, and no redundant verification system. Zurab Lomidze was a 29-year-old keeper hired approximately 8 months earlier. He had come to the zoo from agricultural labor in a rural district outside the city, drawn by the modest but steady salary. He had no formal zoological training, his orientation consisting of several days shadowing a senior keeper before being assigned to the bear section independently. The morning routine required cleaning the bear enclosures while the animals were secured in holding pens. A senior colleague was responsible for shifting each bear and verbally confirming the lockout. On this morning, the miscommunication was simple and fatal. The senior keeper believed the shift had already been completed by another staff member who had passed through earlier. He relayed this assumption to Zurab as confirmation. No one had actually moved the bear. Zurab unlocked the service door and entered the narrow corridor between the inner wall and the enclosure's rock features. The Caucasian brown bear, a roughly 380-pound adult female, was still inside. Brown bears are among the most powerful terrestrial predators in the northern hemisphere, with Caucasian brown bear females typically weighing between 250 and 400 pounds, and males exceeding 450 pounds. Despite their smaller stature compared to some subspecies, Caucasian brown bears are exceptionally powerful. Brown bears are not typically predatory toward humans, but become extremely dangerous when startled at close range, particularly in confined spaces where escape routes are blocked. Defensive attacks are fast and violent, involving swipes from claws often exceeding 3 inches in length and bite force approaching 900 pounds per square inch. Most captive bear attacks occur during enclosure entry, when keepers mistakenly believe the animal has been secured. Zurab encountered the bear almost immediately. The confined space, less than 6 feet wide between the rock wall and the enclosure barrier, left no room for retreat. The bear, startled by the sudden appearance of a human at close range, reacted defensively. According to the scene reconstruction conducted by investigators, the bear lunged forward and rose partially onto its hind legs, delivering a powerful swipe that struck Zurab across the upper body and knocked him against the corridor wall. The bear followed immediately with a bite to his shoulder and upper chest. The crushing force caused massive tissue damage to his collarbone and the surrounding area. The attack lasted less than half a minute before the bear retreated deeper into the enclosure, but the injuries sustained in the confined corridor were unsurvivable. Staff heard the commotion and reached the service door within roughly a minute, but were unable to enter safely until the bear was lured into the holding pen with food. Zurab Lomidze was found unresponsive in the corridor. Emergency medical services were called, but the injuries were incompatible with survival. He was pronounced dead before reaching the hospital. He was 29 years old and had worked at the zoo for less than a year. The investigation determined that a verbal miscommunication between staff members had resulted in the keeper entering an unsecured enclosure and that the facility lacked any formal lockout verification system. The zoo's single-functioning security camera had captured a partial angle of the corridor entrance. Georgian authorities reviewed the footage during their investigation into operational negligence. The footage was retained as evidence while the case remained active. The zoo closed permanently within the following year, and the footage remains restricted in court evidence archives. It was September 19, 2014. And the late dry season had reduced the waterways of Zambia's South Luangwa Valley to sluggish brown channels flanked by exposed sand and cracked mud. The receding water had concentrated wildlife along the remaining river. A small, independently operated walking safari camp ran multi-day guided treks along the river system. Séverine Latrouche, a 39-year-old French freelance wildlife photographer based in Lyon, had arrived at the camp as part of a 7-day walking safari expedition. She had traveled extensively across East and Southern Africa and carried a professional reputation for pursuing close-range shots. Camp staff would later note she had questioned the group's pace on the first day, preferring to move independently. I find it interesting how experience can sometimes work against you. When you've been close to dangerous animals before and walked away fine, it rewires your sense of what's risky. You start trusting yourself more than the rules. The group of 6 guests was led by Chimwemwe Nkoma, a 42-year-old Zambian guide armed with a heavy-caliber rifle and carrying over 15 years of river experience on foot. He emphasized before each walk that guests must remain within visual contact of the guides and that approaching the river's edge was strictly prohibited. On the 3rd morning, the group paused on an elevated bank overlooking a river bend. A large colony of carmine bee-eaters had established nesting burrows in the exposed bank below. Latrouche moved away while the guides were occupied, descending toward the colony with her camera. She approached within a few feet of the water's edge. A tourist filming the colony from the group's rest position captured the initial seconds. Though the footage becomes unstable as the situation unfolds, the attack itself is partially obscured. Nile crocodiles are among the deadliest reptiles on Earth, responsible for more human fatalities than any other large predator in Africa. Mature males commonly exceed 15 feet and weigh over 1,500 pounds. Their attack relies on explosive acceleration from concealment, powerful jaws clamping onto a victim before dragging them into deeper water to drown. Bite force is estimated to exceed 3,000 pounds per square inch. Once a crocodile initiates its death roll, escape is virtually impossible. The crocodile struck from just below the surface at an angle. Massive jaws clamped around her lower leg, pulling her off her feet instantly. Nkoma scrambled down the bank and fired. The shot struck, but failed to interrupt the crocodile's momentum. Latrouche was pulled toward deeper water within seconds. Violent churning was visible at the surface as the crocodile initiated a death roll. The disturbance moved toward the center of the channel before the water settled to stillness. What gets me about crocodile attacks is the silence afterward. One moment there's chaos, splashing, screaming, and then the water just goes flat, like nothing happened. That stillness is the part I can't shake. Wildlife authorities recovered remains downstream after an extended search effort. The investigation confirmed Latrouche had left the group area without guide knowledge and approached the water in violation of safety protocols. No negligence was found on the part of Nkoma or the operator. The partial footage was seized as part of the investigation and has never been officially released. Looking at this case, the most dangerous moment on any walking safari isn't when you see the threat. It's when you forget it's there, right beneath the surface, waiting for you to take one step too many. It was July 23rd, 2016, and midsummer humidity hung thick over the Great Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, where black bears fattening on wild berries and tourist garbage moved freely through the rental cabins dotting the hillsides above Gatlinburg. For Darren Westbrook, a 38-year-old insurance adjuster from Atlanta, this weekend was supposed to be a celebration. He had booked a mountain property with his wife, Andrea, to mark their 10th wedding anniversary. Andrea had found the listing online, a rustic A-frame with a wraparound porch, mountain views, and a hot tub under the tree canopy. The cabin sat roughly 800 feet from the main road, surrounded by dense hardwood forest typical of the region. The nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile down the hill, out of sight and earshot. The isolation was the selling point. The owner had installed a motion-activated security camera above the carport 6 months earlier, following previous incidents with wildlife. A laminated sheet on the refrigerator listed bear safety guidelines, including instructions to store all garbage in the bear-proof bins provided at the end of the driveway. Darren and Andrea spent the afternoon hiking the nearby trails before returning to prepare dinner. The evening had been relaxed. Steaks on the grill, a bottle of wine on the porch, the sound of crickets filling the valley below them. That evening, while cleaning dishes, Andrea noticed movement through the kitchen window. A black bear, estimated later at 180 pounds, was tearing open garbage bags the couple had left near the carport. Andrea suggested they remain inside and let the animal leave on its own. Darren insisted the bear needed to be scared away before it caused property damage they would be charged for. The cabin's garbage had been left unsecured despite posted warnings about bear-proof container requirements. The bear showed no hesitation as it scattered trash across the gravel driveway, behavior consistent with animals repeatedly rewarded for raiding human food sources. Park officials would later determine this was a sub-adult male, approximately 3 years old, reported near rental properties 7 times in the previous 2 months. Each report described the same pattern: garbage left out by visitors, the bear feeding without consequence, and the animal moving on before wildlife officers could respond. Shortly after 9, Darren opened the front door carrying a push broom and a flashlight. Andrea remained inside, but continued to tell her husband to come back. The night was warm and still. With no wind, insects pulsed in the surrounding trees. Darren crossed the porch and stepped down onto the gravel, sweeping the flashlight beam toward the carport. He approached within roughly 15 feet of the bear, yelling and waving the broom. The bear lifted its head but did not retreat. Its eyes reflected the flashlight with a flat, unblinking stare. Darren stepped closer, swinging the broom toward the animal. American black bears can run up to 30 miles per hour and possess powerful jaws capable of crushing bone. While generally shy of humans, food-conditioned bears lose their natural wariness and may exhibit aggression when confronted directly. Young male bears are disproportionately involved in human conflict situations, particularly when food-conditioned. In rare cases, these bears display predatory behavior rather than defensive responses. The bear charged. The security camera captured Darren stumbling backward and swinging the broom, which struck the animal's shoulder without effect. The bear hit him at full speed, knocking him to the ground near the carport's concrete pad. The flashlight beam swung wildly across the trees before going dark. The bear began biting at Darren's upper body and head. He rolled onto his stomach and covered his neck with his hands, standard defensive posture taught in bear safety courses. The bear did not stop. It bit repeatedly at his back, shoulders, and skull, then briefly paused before resuming the attack with sustained intensity. The assault continued for approximately 2 minutes. Andrea's screams were audible on the camera's audio feed, but she did not exit the cabin. The bear stopped attacking and moved back toward the scattered garbage. It fed for another half-minute before walking into the forest. Andrea called 911 moments later. Responders arrived roughly 15 minutes after the call and found Darren unresponsive in the driveway. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner determined the cause of death as massive trauma to the head and neck with significant blood loss. Wildlife officers reviewed the security footage and identified the attack as predatory rather than defensive, based on the bear's failure to retreat after the initial contact and its continued feeding behavior afterward. The bear was tracked and euthanized 2 days later, approximately 3 miles from the cabin. It was November 2nd, 2017, and the headlights of the tour bus cut through the absolute darkness of Tsavo East National Park. The engine had fallen silent 20 minutes earlier, and what had begun as a minor inconvenience was rapidly transforming into something far more sinister. Ramesh Patel, a 58-year-old retired hardware wholesaler from Leicester, had been traveling through East Africa for 2 weeks, his first trip abroad since his wife Anjali's death from cancer 8 months earlier. His adult children had encouraged the journey, hoping it might help him process his grief. The safari tour had been a last-minute addition to his itinerary, booked through a budget operator that offered rates significantly lower than established companies. During the mandatory safety briefing that morning, the guide had emphasized repeatedly that passengers must never leave the vehicle under any circumstances. The tour bus, a converted truck with open sides and bench seating for 12 passengers, had been making the return journey to the main lodge when the engine began sputtering around 7:15 p.m. Kimani, the driver, kept his torch trained on the engine and positioned himself so the bus remained between him and the grass line. His attempts to restart the engine produced only clicking sounds. Several passengers noticed movement in the darkness beyond. Within minutes, at least 5 lions had materialized from the bush, their forms becoming visible as they crossed through the beam of the headlights. The Australian couple began filming on their phones. Kimani climbed back into the driver's seat and radioed the main office for assistance, reporting their GPS coordinates. The office confirmed a rescue vehicle would be dispatched, estimating roughly 30 minutes for arrival. African lions are the only truly social big cats, living in prides of up to 30 individuals that cooperate in hunting and territory defense. Adult male lions in the wild typically weigh between about 330 and 420 pounds. Even so, a fully grown male can easily overpower a lone human. Their night vision, aided by a reflective layer behind the retina, makes them far more effective in low light than a human. Most critically, male lions are territorial and will attack perceived threats to assert dominance, particularly after dark when their confidence peaks. The lions continued their slow approach, occasionally pausing to watch the bus. Their movements were unhurried but deliberate, closing the distance by increments. Kimani instructed all passengers to remain seated and silent, explaining that lions typically would not attack a vehicle unless provoked. Another passenger later reported that Ramesh seemed almost manic, insisting repeatedly that the animals could sense fear and that showing confidence was the solution. Moments later, Ramesh stood and moved toward the open side of the bus. Kimani grabbed his arm, pleading with him to sit down. Ramesh pulled free, stating that he would demonstrate how to properly handle wildlife. Multiple passengers were filming as Ramesh positioned himself on the step at the side exit, 1 foot on the ground. He raised his arms above his head and shouted toward the closest lion, a male approximately 40 feet away. The lion closed the gap in seconds. The attack was captured on 4 separate phones from different angles. The videos were grainy and overexposed where the headlights hit. They showed the sequence well enough to corroborate witness statements. The male exploded forward with shocking acceleration, his massive body low to the ground as he closed the gap. Ramesh had no time to react. The impact knocked him completely off the bus step, his body slamming into the hard-packed earth with audible force. The lion's jaws clamped around Ramesh's throat before he could even attempt to rise, the predator's frame pinning him flat. The male began shaking his head violently side to side. Ramesh's arms, which had initially flailed against the lion's shoulders, went slack within 15 seconds. Blood spread rapidly across the pale dirt, appearing black in the artificial light. The lion maintained his grip for nearly a minute, applying crushing pressure that collapsed Ramesh's trachea and fractured cervical vertebrae. When the body had gone completely limp, the male released his hold momentarily before clamping down again on Ramesh's shoulder. He began dragging the body backward, away from the bus and out of the headlight beams. 2 female lions materialized from the darkness to join the male, their interest in the kill immediate. Within seconds, all 3 had dragged Ramesh approximately 60 feet from the bus, where they began feeding. Kimani had radioed park control the moment Ramesh stepped down. The rescue vehicle, already en route, diverted directly to their coordinates. Rangers arrived 25 minutes after the initial attack, equipped with spotlights, loudspeakers, and air horns. They fired rifle shots into the air to drive the lions away from what remained of Ramesh's body. The medical examiner's report, filed 2 days later, listed cause of death as primary cause: catastrophic cervical trauma with rapid hemorrhage. The report noted that Ramesh had suffered a crushed windpipe, fractured neck at the C3 and C4 vertebrae, and massive tissue damage to the throat and upper chest. Ramesh's body was repatriated to Leicester. Kenyan wildlife authorities seized the phone footage from all passengers as evidence and levied substantial fines against the company for negligence. The operator's license was suspended pending safety improvements. It was April 7th, 2015, and the air across central Romania carried the damp chill of a season still struggling to turn. A regional municipal zoo on the outskirts of a mid-sized city opened its gates to a mostly empty parking lot. The morning air smelled of damp concrete and animal feed. Budget shortfalls had reduced the staff to a skeleton crew. The zoo housed a pair of Siberian tigers in an outdoor enclosure connected to an indoor holding area by a heavy steel sliding gate. The enclosure itself was a rectangular concrete space, roughly the size of a tennis court, bordered on 3 sides by high walls, and on the 4th by a viewing gallery that had been closed to the public for months due to structural concerns. Maintenance logs dating back over a year had flagged the gate's latch mechanism as unreliable, noting that the bolt did not always seat fully into its housing, leaving the gate dependent on friction rather than a fully engaged locking pin. Replacement parts had been requested, but never approved. Dragomir Petrescu, a 54-year-old senior keeper, had worked at the zoo for over 2 decades. His long tenure had earned him the trust of management and the deference of younger staff, but it had also produced a familiarity with routine that had dulled his attention to protocol. Dragomir had cleaned the tiger enclosure hundreds of times without incident, and that repetition had become its own kind of danger. The zoo used a lockout board system to track animal locations during cleaning. Before any keeper entered an enclosure, the corresponding animal was to be shifted into a holding area, the shift marked on the board, and a second visual confirmation made through the holding pen bars before enclosure entry. On this morning, Dragomir checked the board and saw the shift marked as complete by a colleague from the earlier feeding round. After decades of routine, he relied solely on the board marking and skipped the visual verification. With 2 keepers absent that morning, Dragomir was covering the enclosure alone. He collected his cleaning equipment and entered the outdoor enclosure. The mark on the board had been made in good faith. The colleague had initiated the shift, guiding the male tiger toward the holding area with feeding cues, but the gate's latch had not engaged fully. The tiger, a roughly 540-pound captive male, had initially moved into the holding area, but subsequently forced the partially latched sliding gate open with its head and forelimbs, re-entering the outdoor enclosure. Liviu Aldea, a 31-year-old junior keeper assigned to the big cat section within the last year, was carrying supplies toward the enclosure from the service building when events began to unfold. Siberian tigers, also known as Amur tigers, are the largest living cat species, with captive males commonly weighing between 400 and 660 pounds. They are ambush predators that strike from behind, targeting the neck and base of the skull to compress the throat or damage the cervical vertebrae. Their bite force can exceed 900 pounds per square inch. In captive settings, tigers retain all predatory instincts regardless of years of human contact, and attacks on keepers are almost always triggered by proximity in enclosed spaces where the animal's ambush instincts activate. The tiger had re-entered the enclosure silently, moving along the concrete wall on the far side. Dragomir, facing away while hosing down the floor, did not see the animal. Based on the scene reconstruction conducted by investigators, the tiger closed the distance rapidly and struck from behind, the full weight of the animal hitting Dragomir in the upper back and knocking him violently to the concrete floor. The tiger's jaws clamped around the back of his neck, maintaining a crushing bite while attempting to drag him across the concrete, compressing the carotid arteries and trachea, while the canines penetrated deep into the neck musculature, causing catastrophic trauma and rapid loss of consciousness. Liviu reached the perimeter fence moments later and saw the attack in progress. He triggered the emergency alert system and shouted towards the service building. Staff began arriving within roughly a minute. The combined commotion from vehicles, air horns, and shouting eventually pushed the tiger toward the holding area, where it was secured, but the damage had already been done. Dragomir lay motionless on the enclosure floor. Emergency medical services were called immediately, but the zoo's location outside the city center meant a response delay of approximately 20 minutes. Dragomir Petrescu was pronounced dead at the scene. He had survived 23 years working alongside some of the most dangerous predators on Earth. The investigation by local prosecutors and workplace safety authorities determined that the gate latch mechanism had failed to engage properly, and that the zoo's lockout verification protocol had not been followed with adequate rigor. The facility was cited for multiple safety violations. The zoo's internal CCTV system had captured the enclosure from a fixed overhead angle. Local prosecutors seized the footage as primary evidence in the workplace negligence investigation. The footage was retained as evidence during ongoing legal proceedings and has not surfaced publicly. It was February 22, 2015, and a cool morning haze hung over the forested hills of a wildlife sanctuary in Madhya Pradesh, central India. The sanctuary's dense sal and teak forests sheltered a concentrated population of large predators, drawing steady traffic from visitors who booked open jeep safari excursions through the reserve's unpaved forest tracks. Harshavardhan Kulkarni, a 45-year-old industrialist from Pune, was a frequent visitor to India's wildlife sanctuaries. He maintained a large personal archive of big cat photographs and considered himself deeply knowledgeable about predator behavior. He had arrived the previous evening and requested the earliest available morning jeep safari departure. The safari guide, Devrath Parihar, a 37-year-old licensed naturalist with the State Forest Department, operated the lead vehicle in a convoy of 3 open-top jeeps. Parihar briefed passengers to remain seated at all times and avoid sudden movements or loud noise near animals. Approximately 90 minutes into the morning jeep safari, the convoy located a large male leopard resting on a low branch near the track at unusually close distance. Parihar cut the engine. Kulkarni immediately began photographing. Unsatisfied with the angle, he stood up in the open vehicle and moved toward the front, gaining elevation and closing the apparent distance to the leopard. The sudden upright posture, direct eye contact, and sharp noise he made attempting to get the cat to turn its head created a combination of triggers at dangerously close range. I can't wrap my head around that decision. You're sitting yards from one of the most explosive predators on the planet, and you stand up and shout at it. That's a level of confidence that only works until the one time it doesn't. Tourists in the second jeep, roughly 15 yards behind, had been filming the leopard. Their camera captured the moments leading up to the attack before the footage becomes chaotic and cuts out. Leopards are among the most powerful predators relative to their body size, with adult males weighing between 130 and 175 pounds. When threatened at close range, a leopard's defensive response is immediate and violent, targeting the head and upper body with claws capable of opening deep lacerations and a bite strong enough to penetrate deeply and cause severe trauma. Leopard attacks on humans are most commonly defensive, triggered by sudden movement or noise, and typically end with rapid disengagement. The reaction was instantaneous. The leopard launched from the branch in a rapid burst of claws and bites, lasting only seconds, striking primarily at Kulkarni's head and upper body. He collapsed backward across the seats as the animal struck. Parihar threw the jeep into gear and accelerated. The leopard disengaged almost immediately and disappeared into the undergrowth. What strikes me about leopard attacks is how fast they begin and end. A few seconds of absolute chaos. The animal vanishes like it was never there, and then you see the damage it left behind. That speed is what makes them so dangerous. Kulkarni had sustained severe lacerations to his head and neck, including a deep puncture wound that caused significant arterial bleeding. Parihar and the other guests applied pressure with whatever cloth was available, but the bleeding was difficult to control. He lost consciousness during the prolonged evacuation along winding forest roads. Despite efforts to stabilize him, he succumbed to his injuries before reaching the district hospital approximately 90 minutes later. The combination of severe blood loss and delayed access to advanced medical care proved fatal. 90 minutes on a winding forest road, not knowing whether the person in the back seat is going to make it. I think about Parihar behind the wheel during that drive, and it's hard to imagine carrying that weight. The investigation determined he had provoked the attack by standing, making direct eye contact, and producing noise at dangerously close range. Reserve authorities restricted the footage, citing an ongoing safety review. Stills surfaced on Indian news outlets within weeks, though no confirmed complete footage has been publicly released. He didn't make it, and every other guest on that safari followed the rules and walked away without a scratch. One decision separated him from them, and it played out in less than 5 seconds. It was November 8th, 2014, and the subarctic darkness had already begun swallowing Churchill, Manitoba, where barely 8 hours of pale daylight separated the long, frozen nights, and hundreds of polar bears gathered along the coast, waiting for Hudson Bay to freeze so they could return to hunting seals on the ice. For Dr. Vaughn Kirkstead, a 43-year-old wildlife biologist from Winnipeg, this was familiar territory. He was in his 3rd season studying bear behavior patterns at a remote research outpost operated by a Canadian wildlife research consortium, roughly 18 miles from Churchill's town center. The building was a reinforced modular structure, elevated on pilings, with small double-paned windows and a single steel entry door that opened inward. The surrounding terrain was flat and exposed, tundra scrub with no trees, and minimal cover, offering little concealment for anything approaching except darkness itself. On clear days, you could see for miles. On overcast November evenings, visibility dropped to almost nothing within minutes of sunset. The facility's perimeter was protected by an electric fence system designed to deter polar bear approaches. The fence had proven reliable for 6 years, delivering a non-lethal but effective shock to any animal making contact. On the morning of November 8th, a power fluctuation caused by degraded wiring went undetected. The fence appeared operational based on indicator lights in the main building, but actual current to the perimeter lines had dropped to less than 20% of normal levels, enough to register on diagnostics, but not enough to deter a large bear. Dr. Kirkstead spent most of the day analyzing data from GPS collars deployed on bears earlier that fall. Weather reports showed temperatures dropping to -12 degrees Fahrenheit, with sunset expected in the late afternoon. Standard protocol required all exterior work to be completed before dusk, and mandated that no one exit the building without an armed escort. Shortly after dusk, Dr. Kirkstead noticed that a weather monitoring station roughly 40 feet from the main entrance was showing erratic readings. He informed his colleagues he would retrieve the device quickly to assess whether ice buildup was affecting the sensors. One colleague reminded him of the escort rule. Dr. Kirkstead told him he would only be outside for a minute. Exterior surveillance cameras recorded him exiting the building moments later. Wearing a heavy parka and carrying a flashlight, he walked directly toward the weather station without scanning his surroundings. The flashlight beam bounced ahead of him across frozen ground. Beyond it, darkness closed in completely. A polar bear appeared at the edge of the camera's field of view seconds later, approaching from the northwest at a steady walk. Its white coat blended almost completely with the snow-covered tundra behind it. It moved without urgency, head low, eyes fixed on the figure ahead. Polar bears are the largest bear species, with adult males weighing between 900 and 1,600 pounds. Unlike brown and black bears, polar bears are apex predators that evolved to hunt seals on sea ice and regularly view humans as potential prey. They are capable of silent stalking behavior, often approaching from downwind to avoid detection. Their sense of smell can detect prey from distances exceeding 1 mile. During late fall near Churchill, bears in a hyperphagia state are particularly motivated by hunger as they await ice formation. The bear closed to within roughly 30 feet before Dr. Kirkstead turned and saw it. He immediately ran toward the building's entrance. The bear accelerated into a full charge. It covered the distance before Dr. Kirkstead reached the door, striking him from behind and dragging him to the ground just feet from the entrance. The attack was swift and focused, with the bear biting repeatedly at his head and neck. Colleagues inside the building heard the commotion and looked through windows, but could not safely intervene without firearms, which were stored in a secured rack inside the building. One researcher activated the emergency alarm, while another retrieved the rifle. By the time someone exited the building with the weapon roughly 90 seconds later, the bear had already begun dragging Dr. Kirkstead's body away from the structure. A single rifle shot struck the ground near the bear, causing it to release the body and retreat roughly 50 yards. It remained visible in the area for another 10 minutes before leaving. Researchers reached Dr. Kirkstead and found no signs of life. Local law enforcement and wildlife officers arrived via helicopter. The medical examiner determined death resulted from massive trauma to the head and neck, consistent with a predatory attack. Investigation of the electric fence revealed the power failure. Footage from surveillance cameras showed the polar bear had been circling the outpost for at least 15 minutes before Dr. Kirkstead exited, testing the fence line at multiple points without receiving a deterrent shock. Facility protocols were updated following the incident to include mandatory fence testing and armed exterior escorts, regardless of task duration. It was May 19, 2015, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the golden grasslands of Chobe National Park. The air hung thick and still as Cabello Maruti steered his open-sided Land Cruiser toward a cluster of acacia trees where a small herd of Cape buffalo grazed. Cabello was a 34-year-old safari guide from Kasan, a border town where tourism jobs were coveted and competition fierce. He'd worked for a private company for 3 years, long enough to develop a reputation among the local guiding community as someone who pushed boundaries. His approach to wildlife viewing prioritized client satisfaction over protocol, getting closer than regulations allowed, staying longer than was safe, and frequently dismissing the cautious advice of more experienced guides. That afternoon's group consisted of 6 American tourists on a 4-day photography package. They'd already seen elephants, giraffes, and a distant pride of lions, but several had expressed disappointment at not getting close enough for dramatic shots. Cabello had promised them something special before the day ended, and when he spotted the buffalo herd less than 100 feet from the vehicle track, he saw his opportunity to deliver. Cape buffalo are among Africa's deadliest animals, killing more hunters and guides than any other large mammal. Bulls can weigh 2,000 pounds, stand over 5 feet tall, and have curved horns spanning over 3 feet, fused at the base into a solid shield with sharp points. Unpredictable and quick to retaliate, they have poor eyesight but excellent hearing and can charge up to 30 miles per hour with surprising agility. As Cabello maneuvered the Land Cruiser to within 60 feet of the herd, the tourists began photographing eagerly. Several buffalo raised their heads, staring directly at the vehicle. One particularly large bull separated slightly from the group, positioning himself between the herd and the vehicle. His head lowered incrementally, and his tail began flicking in short, agitated movements. These were textbook warning signs that experienced guides recognized as preludes to charging behavior. But Cabello continued narrating about buffalo's social structure as if nothing was amiss. After approximately 10 minutes of viewing, Cabello announced he needed to relieve himself. He turned off the engine, a clear violation of basic safari protocol, and stepped down from the driver's side, walking around to the rear of the vehicle. The tourists continued filming through the open sides of the Land Cruiser, their cameras fixed on the herd, inadvertently documenting what would happen next. The bull buffalo remained stationary, approximately 50 feet away, head still lowered and tail flicking with increasing frequency. Cabello moved to a spot just behind the rear tire, partially visible to the tourists and fully exposed to the herd. The attack began without additional warning. The bull buffalo exploded into motion, closing the distance in about 3 seconds. Cabello turned at the sound of hoofbeats, his body language shifting from casual to panicked in the final instant before impact. The buffalo's right horn caught him just below the rib cage, the force of the 2,000-pound animal at full charge driving the horn through his abdomen and out near his lower back. His feet left the ground as the animal's forward momentum carried him upward, a grotesque display of raw power. The buffalo shook its head violently, flinging Cabello sideways where he landed heavily on the hard-packed earth, roughly 8 feet away. He tried to rise, one hand clutching at the massive wound in his abdomen, but the buffalo was already circling back. Tourists watched in horror as the animal's front hooves came down on Cabello's chest and shoulder with sickening force. The buffalo stomped repeatedly, each blow crushing bone and driving Cabello's body deeper into the dust. The tourists' screams filled the audio track, their voices raw with horror as they pounded frantically on the metal window frames. Several shouted for someone to start the vehicle, but none knew how to start or drive the Land Cruiser. The sustained attack lasted roughly 40 seconds before the buffalo finally stepped back, regarding Cabello's motionless form briefly before trotting back to rejoin the herd, which had barely moved throughout the incident. One of the tourists, a man from Colorado with emergency medical training, managed to radio another guide on the backup communication device Cabello had left in the front seat. Park medics arrived 14 minutes later in a rapid response vehicle, but Cabello had already died from massive internal hemorrhaging. The preliminary field examination noted multiple fractured ribs, a punctured liver, collapsed lungs, and severe crush injuries to the chest cavity. The locally operating safari company settled privately with Cabello's family, providing an undisclosed sum to his wife and 2 young daughters. The company implemented mandatory engine-on policies and doubled the minimum distance requirements for buffalo viewing. The footage, taken as evidence by park authorities, was later leaked online before being repeatedly removed. It was September 14, 2016, and the landscape of central Kenya stretched brown and still under a cloudless sky. A mid-sized wildlife rehabilitation center operated along a shallow river valley, housing 9 elephants rescued from failed private reserves and human-wildlife conflict situations. Odhiambo Karithi was a 58-year-old head elephant keeper who had worked with the center's animals for over 15 years, including daily hands-on care conducted within arm's reach of the elephants. The center still used free contact management, a legacy practice that allowed keepers to work in the same space as the animals without barriers. His confidence in his ability to read the animals, particularly the oldest male, was absolute. The male in question was a 40-year-old elephant rescued from a collapsed private reserve over a decade earlier. He was the largest animal at the center, standing over 10 feet at the shoulder, with thick, deeply scarred tusks that spoke to years of conflict before his rescue. He had been manageable under free contact handling for years, responding to vocal commands and tolerating the physical proximity of keepers. But over the previous week, staff had observed subtle changes. Temporal gland secretions appeared as faint, dark streaks below the elephant's eyes. His behavior during handling had turned occasionally irritable, and a slight increase in urine dribbling had been noted. These were early signs signs of must, a hormonal state that could transform even the most docile male elephant into an unpredictably aggressive animal. Odhiambo, who had managed the elephant through previous must cycles, assessed the signs as preliminary and not yet requiring isolation or increased distance. He continued the morning washdown routine, entering the enclosure with a hose and brush. Wekasan Zhao, a 27-year-old junior keeper and Odhiambo's trainee for the past 2 years, observed from behind the enclosure barrier. African elephants are the largest land animals, with adult males weighing between 10,000 and 13,000 pounds and standing up to 12 feet at the shoulder. Males periodically enter must, a hormonal state in which testosterone levels can rise 20 to 60 times normal levels, producing extreme aggression even in animals with decades of human contact. Physical signs of must include temporal gland secretions, strong odor, and continuous urine dribbling. Early must is often misjudged by keepers because behavioral changes can escalate unpredictably. A single head strike from an animal of this size can throw a person several feet, and the crushing force of a single footstep is easily sufficient to collapse a human rib cage. The washdown proceeded normally for several minutes. Odhiambo worked along the elephant's left flank, running the brush across the animal's shoulder while the hose sprayed water over its back. Then the elephant's behavior shifted. The animal became rigid, its enormous ears flaring wide, its trunk rose and curled. Odhiambo recognized the change immediately and began backing toward the enclosure gate, moving slowly to avoid triggering a charge. The elephant closed the distance in only a few strides. The massive animal slammed its head and tusks forward, driving Odhiambo against the pipe barrier separating the enclosure from the service area. The pressure was immense and immediate. The elephant stepped back, and Odhiambo collapsed to the ground. Before he could move, the animal brought a front foot down on his torso with its full weight. Wekesa triggered the emergency alert and attempted to redirect the elephant using vocal commands the animal had responded to throughout its years at the center. The elephant did not respond. Its attention remained fixed on the figure beneath its feet. Staff arrived with a vehicle and noise deterrents, eventually driving the agitated animal to the far side of the enclosure. Emergency medical transport was called immediately, but the center's rural location meant a significant delay before paramedics arrived. Odhiambo Karithi was pronounced dead at the scene from unsurvivable crushing injuries to the chest and torso. The investigation by Kenyan wildlife authorities determined that the keeper had continued free contact handling despite early signs of must, and that the facility lacked a written protocol for must stage assessment and mandatory distance escalation. A visiting international researcher had been filming the elephants from an adjacent observation platform when the incident occurred. Kenyan wildlife authorities confiscated the footage as part of their investigation. The footage remains sealed as government evidence and has never been publicly released. It was August 9th, 2018, and the Zambezi River moved sluggishly through the floodplain of Zimbabwe's Mana Pools region, its waters reduced by peak dry season to a fraction of their volume. The shrinking river had concentrated massive pods of hippopotamus into crowded pools and reed channels, with territorial males defending diminishing space. A small safari lodge operated multi-day canoe safari excursions along this stretch. Rosalind Critchlow, a 57-year-old retired solicitor from Bath, England, had booked the 3-day canoe safari as the final leg of a southern African itinerary. An experienced traveler, she had never undertaken a river-based safari. She completed a paddling orientation at the lodge before departure. The canoe safari group of 4 canoes carrying 8 guests was led by Takudzwa Chirinda, a 34-year-old Zimbabwean river guide with over 8 years of Zambezi experience. Chirinda briefed the group that hippopods would be given wide clearance, travel would be single file, and his navigation decisions were final. Something about canoe safaris has always made me uneasy. On a game drive, you have a vehicle, an engine, metal around you. On the water, you have a thin shell of fiberglass and a paddle. That's the entire barrier between you and whatever's underneath. The first day passed without incident. The second morning, low. Water had visibly compressed the channel, and hippo activity was heavier. Chirinda navigated along the main channel, steering clear of known hippo concentrations. The guest paddling behind Critchlow's canoe was wearing a head-mounted action camera. The camera recorded the capsizing, though the footage becomes submerged and chaotic within seconds of the impact. Hippopotamuses are widely regarded as one of the leading causes of large animal-related deaths in Africa. Adult males weigh between 3,000 and 4,000 pounds. Their massive jaws open nearly 180 degrees, revealing lower canines exceeding 16 inches. Bite force exceeds 1,800 pounds per square inch. During dry season, shrinking water forces territorial males into closer proximity with rivals, dramatically increasing aggression. Solitary males displaced from pods are considered particularly dangerous, occupying unpredictable positions and responding to intrusion with immediate violence. That last detail is the one that really gets to me. A displaced male doesn't belong to a pod, doesn't stay in a known pool, and doesn't follow the patterns that guides have spent years memorizing. It's the one variable you can't plan for. The solitary male had been submerged in a section of the channel not known to contain a pod. Chirinda had no indication of its presence. The hippo surfaced directly beside Critchlow's canoe, its massive head rising from the brown water. It struck the canoe broadside, capsizing it instantly and throwing Critchlow into the shallower edge of the channel. I keep coming back to the randomness of it. A few yards to the left or right, and the hippo surfaces beside a different canoe or misses them entirely. That's the margin. A few yards on a river that stretches for thousands of miles. The hippo lunged toward her in the shallows. Its jaws opened wide and came down on her midsection. The animal bit down with crushing force and jerked violently, then released before submerging and circling back. Briefly, Chirinda paddled back and struck the water with his paddle in an attempt to distract the animal, causing it to disengage, but the initial assault had already caused fatal damage. Just imagining Chirinda turning that canoe around and paddling toward a 4,000-pound hippo with nothing but a paddle. That's a kind of courage most people never have to find in themselves, and even that wasn't enough. Chirinda and another guest lifted Critchlow onto a sandbar. He radioed the lodge for emergency evacuation. She had sustained catastrophic crushing injuries and showed no signs of breathing by the time the evacuation boat arrived approximately 40 minutes later. She was later declared dead. The investigation determined Chirinda had navigated correctly, avoided all known hippo concentrations, and followed standard procedures. The displaced male's position was unforeseeable. Chirinda was cleared of all fault. Canoe safari operations were temporarily suspended pending a safety review, and the Wildlife Authority issued an advisory on hippo displacement risks during low water conditions. The footage was submitted as evidence during a coroner's inquest and has not been made publicly available. It was August 19th, 2017, and peak summer had turned Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula into a theater of abundance. As salmon choked the rivers and brown bears gathered in extraordinary densities along every tributary, feeding with single-minded intensity to build fat reserves for winter. A documentary film crew was working in a remote river valley, filming this annual spectacle for a European broadcast series. Dmitry Volkov, a 35-year-old wildlife cinematographer from Moscow, was part of the four-person team. The crew had been in the region for 8 days, operating under permits issued by local wildlife authorities and accompanied by an experienced guide familiar with bear behavior. The guide, a former park ranger from a nearby nature reserve, had spent over a decade working in Kamchatka's bear country and had managed dozens of close encounters without incident. He carried a flare gun and bear spray, but no firearm. Russian permit conditions for the area prohibited lethal weapons outside of licensed hunting operations. The Kamchatka Peninsula supports one of the world's densest brown bear populations, with an estimated 16,000 animals across the region. August represents peak feeding activity as bears consume salmon to build fat reserves before denning. The crew's filming location was a tributary, roughly 40 miles from the nearest road access, requiring helicopter transport. The valley floor was lush with vegetation fed by summer rains, and the sound of the river masked most ambient noise. On the morning of August 19th, the team identified a female bear with 2 cubs fishing along a shallow section of the river, approximately 200 yards from their base camp. The guide established a filming position on elevated ground that provided clear sightlines while maintaining safe distance. He reminded the crew that this particular stretch of river was used heavily by sows with cubs during the salmon run, and that their elevated position was chosen deliberately to avoid triggering maternal aggression. Dmitry operated the primary camera, a professional cinema unit mounted on a tripod with a telephoto lens. The other crew members managed sound equipment and a secondary camera. Filming proceeded without incident through the late morning. Dmitry noticed that the angle of light had shifted in a way that created better contrast for capturing the bear's movements. He mentioned to the guide that he wanted to reposition to a spot roughly 80 yards to the west, where a rock outcropping would provide both elevation and improved lighting. The guide advised against splitting the group, but did not physically prevent Dmitry from moving. He told Dmitry to make noise as he walked and to turn back immediately if visibility dropped. Dmitry acknowledged the advice, picked up a handheld camera, and walked toward the outcropping alone. The terrain between the main filming position and the outcropping included dense willow shrubs that reduced visibility to less than 15 feet in some areas. The river noise covered his footsteps, but also masked any sound the bears might have made as they moved. Dmitry maintained focus on reaching the destination, rather than continuously monitoring for wildlife. What he could not see was that the female bear had moved upstream with her cubs, and was now fishing in a section of river that placed Dmitry's path directly between her and the cubs' position. Brown bears in Kamchatka can weigh up to 1,400 pounds, with females typically ranging between 400 and 700 pounds. Maternal aggression in defense of cubs is the leading cause of bear attacks in the region. Female bears will charge perceived threats at close range without warning, and often make multiple attacks to ensure the threat is neutralized. Their size and power make even a single strike capable of causing catastrophic injury. Dmitry emerged from the willow shrubs roughly 45 yards from the female bear and about 30 yards from her cubs. The bear saw him immediately and charged without vocalization or warning posture. Dmitry turned to run back toward the crew's position, but tripped on uneven ground after a few steps. The bear reached him in seconds. The guide, watching from the elevated position, shouted a warning but had no way to intervene across the distance. The secondary camera operator kept filming. The bear struck Dmitry with both front paws, pinning him to the ground, then bit his head and upper back. She released briefly, circled him, and attacked again, biting at his legs and torso. The assault lasted roughly 30 seconds before the bear returned to her cubs and began herding them downstream, away from the area. The guide and 2 crew members ran toward Dmitry, while the 4th remained at the base position to radio for helicopter evacuation. They reached him within minutes and found him unresponsive with severe trauma to multiple body regions. The helicopter arrived roughly 2 hours later, but paramedics confirmed death at the scene. Russian authorities reviewed the footage captured by the crew and determined that Dmitry's decision to separate from the group and move through terrain with limited visibility led directly to the encounter. The female bear's behavior was classified as defensive maternal aggression. No action was taken against the animal. It was September 3rd, 2016, the South African high-veld winter giving way to early spring warmth as midday sun beat down on Kruger National Park. In full view of multiple witnesses and a running dashcam, a multi-ton animal decides a human presence is a threat worth eliminating. Leanne de Kock was a 52-year-old primary school administrator from Bloemfontein, known among her colleagues for her methodical approach to managing student records and her tendency to defer to authority figures. She had never been on safari before. Her sister-in-law had organized the extended family trip, booking a guided day tour through one of the park's smaller operators. Leanne had expressed nervousness about the wildlife, but trusted the guide implicitly, believing his experience would keep them safe. That morning, she had asked several times whether it was safe to be so close to the animals, but when reassured by the guide, she nodded and said nothing further. African bush elephants are the largest land animals on Earth, with bulls weighing up to 13,000 pounds and standing over 12 feet tall at the shoulder. Their trunks are composed of thousands of dense muscle bundles, capable of lifting several hundred pounds while remaining precise enough to grasp small vegetation. Despite their size, elephants can charge at speeds of up to 25 miles per hour. Male elephants experience musth, a physiological state marked by temporal gland secretions running down the sides of the face, continuous urine dribbling, heightened restlessness, and sharply increased aggression. During these episodes, which can last months, bulls become unpredictable and hyper-aggressive, attacking anything perceived as a threat. The guide had stopped just outside a designated picnic area, despite posted warnings stating that exiting vehicles beyond marked zones was prohibited. A bull elephant was visible approximately 70 yards away, partially obscured by the trees. Several family members had pointed it out immediately. The animal was feeding, its ears loosely flapping against its body as it cooled itself in the heat. The guide assured everyone it was fine, that the elephant was far enough away and calm. A family in a nearby SUV had parked to observe from inside their vehicle, their dashcam running as they recorded the scenery. As Leanne's group unpacked sandwiches and coolers, spreading a blanket on the ground, the elephant slowly turned its massive head toward the vehicles. Its ears, which had been relaxed against its body, suddenly spread outward and remained rigid, a warning signal that precedes aggression in elephants. The dashcam footage, later provided to park authorities, captured the charge from start to impact, showing what happened next with devastating clarity. The elephant suddenly charged, its ears flared wide, trunk initially held tight against its chest. People heard the sound of its approach, a low rumbling bellow combined with the thunder of feet striking packed earth. They reacted chaotically. Several family members lunged for open vehicle doors, while others screamed and stumbled backward in panic. Leanne froze near the rear door of the tour van, approximately 8 feet from safety. Whether she was paralyzed by fear or simply unable to process the speed of the charge, she remained motionless for nearly 2 seconds, an eternity in the context of a charging elephant. The bull reached her in moments, its trunk snapping outward to shove and hook her around the torso just below the ribcage. The force lifted her completely off the ground, her legs dangling as she was raised roughly 5 feet in the air. The elephant slammed her against the side of the SUV with tremendous force. The sound of impact, a sharp metallic deformation followed by a dull, heavy thud. The vehicle's side panel visibly dented inward. The elephant yanked her back and drove her forward again using its head and shoulder, her body striking the vehicle a second time with even greater force. Her head snapped violently on impact. She fell to the ground when the animal disengaged, landing in a crumpled heap. The footage showed her attempting to rise, one arm pushing weakly against the dirt before the elephant surged forward again, ramming her prone body with its skull and upper tusk base, sending her sliding several feet across the clearing. The bull then stepped forward and pressed a massive front foot down onto her upper torso, pinning her briefly against the ground. After approximately 8 seconds, the elephant stepped back as the guide hesitated before finally revving the engine and shouting, the sudden noise drawing the animal's attention away. Leanne had stopped moving by then, her body twisted at an unnatural angle. A German tourist in the nearby SUV called emergency services. Park rangers arrived minutes later, but Leanne showed no signs of life when they reached her. The medical examiner's report listed massive internal trauma as the cause of death, including multiple fractured ribs, a ruptured spleen, severe head trauma, and a broken neck. The guide's permit was suspended indefinitely following investigation by authorities. Leanne's family declined all media interviews, but released a brief statement through their attorney requesting privacy. The dashcam footage was sealed under court order, was used as evidence during the investigation. It was July 18th, 2017, and a steady drizzle fell over the grounds of a city-run zoological park in São Paulo State, Brazil. The zoo maintained a small collection of big cats in aging but functional enclosures, and its veterinary unit was equipped with a CCTV system that recorded all procedures. Reinaldo Cerqueira was a 47-year-old senior big cat keeper who had worked with the zoo's lions for over 12 years. His role extended beyond daily care into direct involvement with veterinary procedures, where his familiarity with the animals made him a critical member of the medical team. He had assisted with dozens of sedation-based examinations over his career and was regarded by the veterinary staff as one of the steadiest handlers in the facility. The procedure scheduled for this morning was a routine dental examination on the zoo's oldest male lion, a 16-year-old animal weighing approximately 450 pounds. The veterinary team prepared a tranquilizer dart calibrated to the most recent recorded weight from the last immobilization several months earlier. The dart was delivered from outside the enclosure, striking the lion in the hindquarter. After nearly 15 minutes of observation, the lion remained motionless on the enclosure floor. Multiple reflex checks, including jaw tone, palpebral reflex, and corneal response, showed no reaction, reinforcing the assumption that the lion was fully sedated. The team, led by Reinaldo, entered the enclosure. The dart had not fully discharged the intended dose, leaving a shortfall in the sedative delivered to the animal's system. Compounding this, the lion's current weight exceeded the outdated record used to calculate the dosage. The result was a lion sedated to a level that mimicked full unconsciousness but sat dangerously close to the threshold of arousal. African lions are apex predators weighing between 330 and 500 pounds, with adult males capable of sudden, partially coordinated movement, even from apparent rest when sedation is incomplete. Their bite force exceeds 650 pounds per square inch, and their retractable claws can inflict deep lacerations with a single swipe. In veterinary settings, incompletely sedated lions represent one of the most dangerous scenarios for zoo staff. The transition from apparent sedation to full alertness can occur within seconds, particularly when physical stimulation triggers an adrenaline surge, pushing the animal out of the sedation plane. Lions under light sedation often appear fully immobile until direct contact provokes a sudden defensive response. Reinaldo assisted beside the veterinarian near the lion's shoulder, stabilizing the animal while the veterinarian worked near the head. The dental examination began and continued for several minutes without indication of any problem. Then the lion's hindquarters twitched, a single, distinct, muscular contraction that rippled across the animal's flank. Reinaldo noticed the movement immediately and called out a warning. Before anyone could withdraw, the lion's eyes opened. Its body convulsed into motion, sluggish at first, the movements uncoordinated from the partial sedation, but escalating rapidly as adrenaline surged through the animal's system. The lion reacted to the closest movement. Reinaldo was directly beside its shoulder, his hand still positioned near the animal. The lion's mouth clamped onto Reinaldo's forearm with crushing force. Simultaneously, a front paw swept outward, claws extended, striking him across the chest and the side of his neck. The lacerations opened deep wounds across his upper torso. According to accounts from the veterinary staff, Reinaldo remained between the lion and the rest of the team as they scrambled toward the enclosure door. Whether this was deliberate positioning or the result of the lion's grip preventing him from moving could not be determined with certainty. Staff outside deployed a second tranquilizer dart, but the supplemental sedation required time to take effect. In the intervening seconds, the lion inflicted critical injuries to Reinaldo's neck and upper torso. The veterinary team evacuated through the enclosure door. By the time the supplemental dart took full effect and staff re-entered, Reinaldo Cerqueira was unresponsive on the enclosure floor. He was pronounced dead at the scene from severe lacerations and bite trauma to the neck. The investigation determined that the initial sedation had been incomplete due to the dart not fully discharging and an inaccurate weight estimate. The zoo suspended all sedation-based procedures pending a comprehensive protocol review. The zoo's veterinary CCTV system had recorded the incident in full. Brazilian federal prosecutors subpoenaed the footage as part of a workplace safety investigation. The victim's family subsequently petitioned under Brazilian privacy law to block public distribution, citing dignity protections for the deceased. The footage remains sealed in federal records and has never been released. It was July 14, 2017. And the winter sun hung low over the dry thornveld of a private game reserve in South Africa's Limpopo province. The reserve bordered one of the country's largest national parks, sharing unfenced boundaries that allowed elephants and other large animals to move freely. Afternoon game drive safaris departed daily from the lodge in open Land Rovers. Sunel Bezuidenhout, a 51-year-old retired school headmistress from Stellenbosch, had booked the safari holiday through a domestic travel agency. She had arrived 2 days earlier with a small group of friends and had no particular wildlife experience beyond occasional park visits. The afternoon game drive safari was led by Thabiso Ndaba, a 29-year-old guide who had obtained certification 4 years earlier but had limited experience handling high-risk elephant encounters. The vehicle carried 5 guests. What unsettles me about this setup is that most guests on a safari have absolutely no way of knowing whether their guide has 2 years of experience or 20. You place your life in someone else's hands the moment you climb into that vehicle, and you never think to question it. Approximately 2 hours in, Ndaba located a female elephant and a young calf near a waterhole. He maneuvered off the main track, closing the distance to approximately 25 yards, closer than typically recommended for elephants with calves. The female detected the approach immediately, ears flaring wide and head lifting to face the vehicle. A dashboard-mounted camera recorded part of the incident, though much of the critical footage is obscured after the vehicle was overturned. Guests in a second vehicle, roughly 80 yards away, also recorded portions of the encounter. African elephants are the largest land animals on Earth, with adult females weighing between 6,000 and 8,000 pounds. Females with calves are among the most dangerous wildlife encounters on the continent. Elephants communicate agitation through warning signals, including ear flaring, head shaking, and mock charges. When these warnings fail, the response escalates to a full charge at speeds exceeding 20 miles per hour, with enough mass to overturn vehicles. Every single warning sign was visible: the ears, the head shaking, the mock charges, and still the vehicle didn't move fast enough. That's the part that's difficult to accept. The signals were all there, and they weren't enough. The elephant issued 2 mock charges, lunging forward with ears spread wide before pulling up short. Ndaba began reversing, but the rear wheels caught in soft sand, slowing the retreat. After repeated mock charges, the elephant committed fully. She closed the remaining distance in seconds, striking the vehicle broadside and forcing it onto its side after repeated impact. Bezuidenhout was thrown from the exposed upper tier. She landed between the overturned vehicle and the charging elephant. The animal struck and trampled her before she could move, then continued to push and strike the vehicle briefly before retreating toward her calf. Bezuidenhout was pronounced dead at the scene from crushing injuries. Ndaba and remaining guests survived with injuries. What makes this one sit so heavy with me is that Bezuidenhout did nothing wrong. She trusted her guide, stayed in her seat, and followed every rule. Sometimes survival depends entirely on decisions someone else makes for you, and that's a terrifying thing to sit with. The investigation found Ndaba had positioned the vehicle well inside safe distance and failed to withdraw at the first signs of agitation. The reserve suspended Ndaba and overhauled training protocols. No action was taken against the elephant. The dashboard footage was submitted to investigators as part of a civil liability review and has not been officially released. The second vehicle's footage was shared privately, though portions later appeared on social media. It was May 4th, 2013, and early spring had barely loosened winter's grip on one of Wyoming's national forests, where snowpack still blanketed the higher elevations, and grizzly bears were emerging from their dens hungry, defensive, and unpredictable. For Trent Mallory, a 51-year-old outdoors enthusiast from Denver, this was the time of year he looked forward to most. He had been visiting the region each spring for nearly a decade, preferring early-season hikes when trails were less crowded, though this timing coincided with the period when grizzlies were particularly active. He had hiked this region enough times to feel comfortable in it, comfortable enough to go alone. Friends later said Trent was cautious by nature, the type who checked weather reports twice and always told someone his route before leaving. He had filed a trip plan with the Forest Service office that morning. Trent began hiking early that morning from a trailhead at approximately 6,400 feet elevation. Conditions were clear with temperatures in the low 40s. Snowpack remained significant at higher elevations, but the trail followed a south-facing slope where melt-off had exposed ground. Patches of mud held tracks from elk and mule deer, and the forest smelled of wet earth and pine. He carried a day pack containing water, snacks, a first aid kit, and a compact video camera he used to document wildlife and landscapes. Bear spray was clipped to his chest harness in accordance with regional recommendations. By mid-morning, Trent had hiked roughly 3 miles into the backcountry. The trail had narrowed to a boot-width track through patches of snow and exposed rock. He stopped at a clearing that offered views across a drainage basin and decided to film a panoramic sweep of the area. He positioned the camera on a flat rock, set it to record, and stepped back to capture himself delivering a brief narration about the location. The camera continued recording after he finished speaking. The clearing was quiet. No birds called. The only sound was wind moving through the trees upslope. Early May represents one of the most dangerous periods for human-bear encounters in the region. Grizzly bears emerge from dens in a state of heightened defensiveness, often aggressively protecting food sources or den sites. Males may have been out of their dens for several weeks, but females with new cubs typically emerge later and remain near den sites for days before traveling longer distances. Bears in this state are highly sensitive to disturbance and may attack with minimal provocation. Adult grizzlies possess immense strength and can charge at speeds exceeding 25 miles per hour. Shortly after, while Trent was adjusting his pack roughly 15 feet from the camera, a grizzly bear emerged from a stand of trees about 40 yards upslope. The bear's appearance was sudden, with no advance noise or warning. Based on forensic analysis of the video footage and scene reconstruction, investigators later theorized that Trent had unknowingly approached within 200 yards of a den site where the bear had denned through the winter. The bear, estimated at roughly 450 pounds, had likely been denning in the area, though no cubs were visible on camera or at the scene. Trent saw the bear and reached for his bear spray. The bear charged immediately, covering the slope in seconds. Trent discharged the spray, but the timing was off, and the stream passed to the bear's left without making contact. The bear hit him with full force, knocking him backward into the rocks where the camera sat. The camera's angle shifted but continued recording audio and partial video of the surrounding trees. The sounds captured on the recording indicated a sustained attack lasting approximately 1 minute, with vocalizations from the bear and impact sounds consistent with biting and striking. The bear left the area shortly after, based on audio analysis showing receding movement through vegetation. Trent's body was discovered by other hikers that afternoon when they passed through the clearing and noticed the camera still recording. They did not approach closely after seeing the scene and immediately hiked back to the trailhead to report the incident. Park rangers and wildlife officers arrived several hours later via helicopter. They confirmed Trent's death and secured the area. The medical examiner determined the cause of death was massive trauma to the head, chest, and abdomen. Rangers retrieved the camera and reviewed the footage. Combined with physical evidence at the scene, they concluded the attack was a defensive response by a bear protecting a den site. Trent's actions showed proper preparedness with bear spray and camera documentation, but the bear's proximity and sudden emergence left insufficient time for effective deterrence. The area was temporarily closed to hiking, and signs warning of recent grizzly activity were posted at surrounding trailheads. It was August 11th, 2014, and the African sun hung heavy over the private game reserve outside Hoedspruit, Limpopo, South Africa. The afternoon air shimmered with heat as a safari vehicle rolled slowly along a dirt track, its passengers scanning the acacia-dotted landscape for wildlife. Marek Volin was a 46-year-old Czech-born mechanical technician who had spent the past decade working short-term industrial contracts throughout Germany. This safari was his first trip to Africa, booked as a budget add-on during a 3-day business layover in Johannesburg. His co-workers had described him as practical and direct, someone who approached problems with mechanical logic. Fellow tourists on the safari would later tell investigators that Marek had been dismissive of safety protocols from the start, repeatedly commenting that predators were lazy during the day and that guides exaggerated dangers to maintain control. He carried a small handheld camcorder and had been filming constantly, stating he wanted to capture rare moments his friends back home would never see. His confidence around wildlife bordered on recklessness, and he had already been reminded twice to remain seated during animal sightings. The reserve stretched across 15,000 acres of bushveld, characterized by tall golden grass, scattered thorn trees, and rocky outcroppings. African lions are among the most formidable predators on the continent, with females typically weighing between 260 and 400 pounds and possessing explosive speed over short distances. Their hunting strategy relies on ambush and concealment. Female lions do the majority of hunting for their pride, using tall grass and terrain features to remain invisible until the moment of attack. Their bite force exceeds 650 pounds per square inch, concentrated through powerful jaws designed to crush vertebrae and windpipes. Most critically, lionesses with cubs are exceptionally dangerous, their maternal instinct overriding any natural wariness of humans or vehicles. The safari vehicle had stopped after the guide spotted a lion cub partially tangled in thorn brush, approximately 40 yards from the track. The young animal was bleating loudly, its cries carrying across the afternoon stillness. The guide immediately warned everyone to remain seated and explained in clear terms that the mother was almost certainly nearby, hidden in the grass. He radioed to other guides in the area, informing them of the situation and their stationary position. Marek began filming the cub, zooming in on its struggles. After several minutes, he became visibly agitated, loudly insisting that the cub looked injured and that someone should intervene. Other tourists told him to listen to the guide. The guide repeated his warning, explaining that approaching would likely trigger a defensive attack and that the cub was not actually trapped, merely momentarily caught. Marek continued arguing, his camera still recording, stating that the guide's job was to protect tourists, not abandon helpless animals. Then, despite the guide's explicit command to stay seated, Marek opened the side door and stepped out onto the dirt, keeping his camera running as he walked toward the cub. The recovered footage showed everything. As Marek approached to within 15 yards, the cub abruptly stopped vocalizing. The video shook slightly as he stepped closer, using his foot to brush aside low branches. The camera's microphone picked up the guide shouting for him to get back in the vehicle. Then, barely audible beneath the sound of Marek's breathing, there was a low, rumbling growl. The lioness struck in a rapid defensive lunge to recover her cub, exploding from grass that had concealed her completely. She covered the distance in less than 2 seconds, launching herself at Marek's back with her full 330-pound weight. The impact drove him face-first into the ground. Screams erupted from the safari vehicle as the lioness clamped her massive jaws onto the back of Marek's neck and upper spine, her teeth penetrating deep into tissue and vertebrae. She dragged him several feet through the dirt, her powerful neck muscles shaking him. Marek's arms moved weakly, his fingers scraping at the ground in futile attempts to crawl. The lioness repositioned her grip, biting down again with crushing force on his shoulder and upper back. Blood darkened the earth beneath them. The cub, now silent, retreated deeper into the brush. The lioness delivered a final bite to Marek's neck, a technique lions use to sever the spinal cord. Johann radioed reserve control immediately, reporting a fatal attack and requesting armed backup. The lioness remained near the body for several minutes, before slowly walking back into the tall grass still watching the vehicle. Armed rangers arrived 18 minutes later, approaching cautiously after confirming the lioness had withdrawn to a distance. Marek Volin was pronounced dead at the scene. The coroner's report listed cause of death as massive trauma to the cervical spine and neck, with secondary injuries including puncture wounds to the upper back, shoulder, and skull. Severe blood loss and spinal cord transection indicated death likely occurred within 2 to 3 minutes of the initial attack. The reserve issued a brief statement emphasizing that the deceased had violated explicit safety protocols. No criminal charges were filed. Investigators secured the original camera media, and the device was later returned to Marek's family after review. It was January 15, 2013, and the heavy tropical air of eastern Java hung over a privately operated reptile park on the outskirts of a coastal city. The facility catered to domestic tourists and small international groups, and its main attraction was a dominant male saltwater crocodile measuring over 15 feet in length. Bagaskoro Wicaksono was a 44-year-old headkeeper and primary show performer. He had conducted the demonstration hundreds of times over the previous 6 years, developing a routine that balanced showmanship with the practical mechanics of feeding a 1,200-pound predator. He knew the crocodile's rhythms, how long it would rest between lunges, where it preferred to surface, and how close it would come to the platform edge. His confidence around the animal was a product of repetition, and that confidence had made him the park's most reliable draw. The afternoon demonstration drew approximately 40 tourists and local visitors, many of them families with children pressed against the viewing rails above the enclosure. Bagaskoro worked from a raised concrete platform extending over the enclosure pool, elevated roughly 4 feet above the water's surface. A single low metal bar ran along the pool-facing edge, designed more as a visual boundary than a functional safety barrier. The platform surface, routinely splashed during demonstrations and coated with residue from fish and raw meat, had become dangerously slick. No non-slip matting or textured coating had ever been applied to the concrete. Bagaskoro used a long pole to dangle chunks of chicken above the water, provoking the lunging strikes that audiences came to see. The 15-foot male responded with characteristic aggression, its massive body surging upward to snatch at the suspended food. Each lunge sent water cascading onto the platform, further coating the already slippery concrete. Saltwater crocodiles are the largest living reptiles, with dominant males commonly exceeding 15 feet in length and weights surpassing 1,200 pounds. They possess the strongest bite force of any living animal, exceeding 3,500 pounds per square inch in large individuals. During active feeding, saltwater crocodiles enter a heightened predatory state in which any movement near the water's surface triggers an immediate strike response. Their attack sequence involves an explosive lunge, a clamping bite designed to secure the prey, and a death roll, a violent spinning maneuver that disorients the victim and can tear limbs or tissue as the animal spins. Once a saltwater crocodile has locked its jaws onto a target, the grip is nearly impossible to break without mechanical intervention. Midway through the demonstration, Bagaskoro stepped back to reposition for a different feeding angle. His right foot landed on a section slick with water and fish residue. His footing gave way instantly. He fell sideways, his upper body pitching toward the pool side of the platform. His hip struck the low metal railing, and his momentum carried his torso over the bar. His right arm dropped within inches of the water's surface. The crocodile had been tracking movement on the platform throughout the demonstration, its predatory responses primed by repeated presentations of food at the water's edge. The sudden appearance of a limb within striking distance triggered an instantaneous response. The crocodile's jaws erupted from the water, clamping onto Bagaskoro's right arm just below the shoulder. The immense bite force crushed through tissue and bone. The crocodile wrenched him sideways over the railing and into the pool before dragging him beneath the surface. The animal immediately initiated a death roll, its massive body spinning violently while maintaining its grip. The rotation pulled him under repeatedly, churning the pool into a froth of brown water and foam. Staff rushed to the platform edge with long hook poles and catch poles, striking at the crocodile and attempting to force a release. Audience members later described repeated attempts to reach Bagascoro, but the crocodile's size and the turbidity of the water made effective intervention impossible. The death roll continued in cycles. The animal would pause, reposition, and roll again, dragging Bagascoro beneath the surface each time. Staff eventually drove the crocodile to the far side, using sustained percussive noise and long poles. The effort took several minutes. When the water finally settled, Bagascoro Wicaksono's body was recovered from the shallow end. He had died from a combination of fatal bite trauma, drowning, and blood loss sustained during the prolonged death roll. The investigation by Indonesian authorities determined that the platform lacked adequate non-slip surfacing and functional safety railing, and that the facility had no written emergency protocol for keeper immersion during feeding demonstrations. Multiple audience members had recorded portions of the incident on personal phones and cameras. Indonesian police collected copies of all footage from witnesses as part of their criminal investigation into the park's safety standards. Authorities requested that platforms remove clips uploaded in the hours following the incident. The park's owner, facing criminal charges and civil lawsuits from the victim's family, obtained a court order suppressing remaining visual evidence. No complete footage has surfaced publicly. It was August 11, 2017, when the near-shore reef waters off Umkomaas, South Africa, became the site of a deadly encounter. The coastal area was experiencing the aftermath of heavy runoff from recent storms, creating murky conditions that reduced underwater visibility to less than 5 feet. The churning waters carried sediment and debris from inland rivers, transforming the normally clear diving environment into a challenging and dangerous setting. The reef system near Umkomaas was known for its diverse marine life, but the recent weather patterns had disrupted normal feeding behaviors and migration routes. Local dive operators had reported increased shark activity in the area, with several species moving closer to shore following baitfish populations displaced by the storms. Roscoe Vulp, a 28-year-old dive tourism videographer, specialized in capturing close-range footage of marine wildlife for documentary productions. Known for his willingness to film in challenging conditions that other divers avoided, Vulp had built a reputation for obtaining dramatic underwater footage. He had arrived at Umkomaas specifically to document how the recent environmental changes were affecting local shark populations. Vulp was part of a small dive group that morning, each equipped with helmet-mounted cameras to record their underwater experience. The group had been briefed about the reduced visibility conditions, but decided to proceed with the dive despite the challenging circumstances. Recent reports of bull shark migration activity in the area had attracted Vulp's professional interest. As the dive progressed, Vulp gradually separated from the main group, drawn by what appeared to be interesting marine activity in a slightly deeper section of the reef. His helmet camera continued recording as he descended several yards below his companions, who remained closer to the surface in better visibility conditions. Bull sharks are among the ocean's most formidable and unpredictable predators, capable of thriving in both saltwater and freshwater environments. These powerful animals can reach lengths of 11 feet and weights exceeding 500 pounds, with bite forces that rank among the strongest of all shark species. Their broad, muscular build and aggressive temperament make them particularly dangerous to humans. Unlike many shark species that prefer deeper waters, bull sharks frequently hunt in shallow, murky environments where their prey has limited visibility and escape options. They are opportunistic feeders with an extremely varied diet, and their highly assertive nature makes them more likely to investigate perceived prey when encountering unfamiliar movements in their hunting grounds. Bull sharks possess exceptional sensory capabilities, including the ability to detect electrical fields generated by living creatures and minute vibrations in the water. Their hunting strategy often involves approaching from below or behind, using surprise to overwhelm their prey before it can react. Vulp made a critical error by separating from his dive group in conditions of severely limited visibility. The murky water that had attracted him for filming purposes also provided perfect cover for predatory ambush attacks. His isolated position made him vulnerable to predators that might avoid larger groups of divers. The bull shark approached from below, using the poor visibility and Vulp's downward focus to remain undetected until the moment of attack. The initial strike targeted his lower torso with devastating force, the shark's powerful jaws clamping down and causing immediate massive trauma. The bite inflicted catastrophic injuries to soft tissue, muscles, and internal organs, with major blood vessels torn in the process. The impact caused Vulp to lose buoyancy control and orientation underwater. The expanding cloud of blood signaled significant trauma. Whether driven by continued feeding behavior or biological response to blood in the water, the shark pressed the attack, rather than releasing and retreating as these predators sometimes do. The second bite struck the upper leg and pelvic region, compounding the already severe injuries. The trauma resulted in rapid and uncontrolled blood loss, as multiple vessels were compromised. The combination of shock, blood loss, and physical damage rapidly undermined Vulp's ability to maintain control of his breathing apparatus. As consciousness faded, seawater began entering his respiratory system. The catastrophic injuries, combined with loss of airway control and continued blood loss, led to death within minutes. Vulp's body sank toward the reef floor as the shark moved away. His helmet camera continued recording until the housing eventually flooded. The other divers discovered Vulp's body during an immediate search operation after realizing he had become separated from the group. Emergency response teams recovered the body and the damaged camera equipment, which provided crucial evidence about the attack sequence. The incident prompted a comprehensive investigation by authorities, leading to temporary diving restrictions in the Umkomaas area during periods of poor visibility. Local dive operators implemented enhanced safety protocols, requiring closer group supervision and improved communication systems. Vulp's family established a foundation promoting diving safety education, emphasizing the importance of maintaining group cohesion during challenging underwater conditions. It was October 11th, 2013, and the morning air carried a sharp chill across the rocky valleys of a private desert conservancy in Namibia's Kunene region. The conservancy was home to a small population of desert-adapted black rhinos, among the rarest large mammals on Earth. It offered guided walking rhino tracking safaris, small groups led on foot through rugged terrain, to observe rhinos at a distance. Torbjørn Vikeland, a 47-year-old marine engineer from Tromsø, Norway, had arrived as part of a broader Southern African safari itinerary. An experienced outdoorsman comfortable on rough ground, this was his first African safari. The walking safari group of 3 guests was led by Isak Garoeb, a 41-year-old Namibian guide with over a decade of experience tracking black rhinos through the Kunene's rocky riverbeds. A second tracker accompanied the group as standard protocol. Garoeb briefed the group that black rhinos were unpredictable and that if the animal displayed agitation, everyone must move behind rock cover immediately. The trackers located fresh spoor in a dry riverbed approximately 2 hours in. 40 minutes later, the group spotted a solitary black rhino at a cautious but acceptable distance of roughly 80 to 100 yards. Garoeb positioned the group behind a cluster of boulders. Another guest had been recording the sighting on a handheld camera from behind the rocks. Only the moments before the charge were captured clearly. Once the rhino turned, the camera was dropped as the guests scrambled for cover. There's something deceptive about those quiet observation moments on a walking safari. Everything feels calm and controlled. The animal is just standing there, and you almost forget that it could close that distance before you finish a single breath. Black rhinos are among the most aggressive large mammals in Africa, weighing between 1,800 and 3,000 pounds and capable of reaching high speeds despite their massive bulk. Their eyesight is poor, but their senses of smell and hearing are acute. Black rhinos charge directly and with commitment, lowering their heads to bring their anterior horn into devastating contact. The impact is sufficient to knock an adult off their feet with bone-breaking force. The wind had been carrying the group's scent away from the rhino. Without warning, the breeze shifted, The rhino's head snapped upward, nostrils flaring. It wheeled toward the group and charged. Goroeb shouted for everyone to scatter behind the rocks. 2 guests and the second tracker dove behind the boulders immediately. Vikaland froze for a critical moment before turning and running in the open, away from cover rather than toward it. That freeze is what haunts me. It wasn't recklessness. It wasn't defiance. His body just chose the wrong option in the 1 second that mattered, and there was no way to undo it. The rhino closed the distance at high speed. Vikaland was struck from behind, the horn impacting his lower back and knocking him violently forward. The rhino ran over him without stopping, its massive weight driving across his body before disappearing into the scrub. The entire attack lasted seconds. Goroeb reached Vikaland within a minute. He was unresponsive with no signs of life. He was pronounced dead before reaching the nearest medical facility. The investigation concluded the sudden wind shift gave no time to react, and that Goroeb's instructions had been correct. The incident was ruled unavoidable. The Conservancy revised minimum tracking distances. The recovered camera footage was turned over to the victim's family as part of the repatriation process. The family has never authorized its release, and the Conservancy has respected their wishes. This is the hardest story to sit with because nobody did anything wrong. The guide was experienced, the distance was acceptable, the protocol was followed, the wind just changed direction, and that was enough to end a man's life. Sometimes nature doesn't need a mistake to be lethal.